In this video, I'm going to share my opinion on what I think the 3 best deer cartridges are. I'm real excited to share them. Let's get into it. Let's face it, with deer hunting, there are a lot of options, and you really can't go wrong with any choice. Whether you're a big fan of a 6.5 Creedmoor, or if you want to go big and fast like a 28 Nosler. All of the cartridges between those two cartridges are going to take deer extremely well. So in this video, I'm just going to share my 3 favorites, the ones that I would pick, and I'll explain why. I'll also share what bullet I would use in them. Starting it off with number 3, I have the 7mm 08 Remington. Now I know what you're thinking, why didn't I pick the parent case, the 308 Winchester? Well, for deer, I actually think the 7mm 08 is just a little bit better. And let me explain for all you 308 fans. I think having a little bit less recoil and being able to shoot a little bit higher BC bullets that aren't as heavy, so going a little bit quicker, you're just going to get better performance, in my opinion. So let's look at that performance with the 7mm 08. Now, I think you can't go wrong with the 120 grain bullet. And you can get this guy going pretty quick, mid 3,200 feet per second. I think the sweet spot for the 7mm 08 is really a 140-ish grain bullet. And you can get that going over 2,900 feet per second. The 7mm 08 is a very efficient cartridge. Now, if you wanted some heavier ones, you definitely can go up to a 150 grain and still get very good performance at mid 2,800 feet per second. I think the biggest bullet you'd probably want to shoot in a 7mm 08, you're kind of pushing it with the 160 grain, mid 2,700 feet per second. But again, for deer, I'm looking mostly at what I would be using would be a 140 grain bullet. The 2 bullets I would use are both made by Barnes. I would use a 120 grain TTSX, where you can get that going a bit quick because you need velocity for these monolithic bullets. But again, going 3,200 or somewhere around there with a 120, that's lethal. And then Barnes also makes a 139 grain LRX. Now, these are not actually 7mm bullets. This is a 130 grain in 30 caliber, and that's a 175 grain in 30 caliber. But I would use a 139 grain LRX. Again, you can still get it mid 2,900 feet per second, plenty fast for expansion, and you get a little bit higher BCs than a 120 grain. Now, I just want to show you the ballistics real fast with a 7mm 08 with that 139 grain LRX with a velocity of 2,900 feet per second. Your energy is almost 2,600 foot-pounds. Check out the recoil. It is very mild recoil. And then I think your distance for deer and good expansion, I think probably 350. You're pushing it at 400. Check out the velocity, only 2159 for a mono bullet. I think it's not going to expand that great at 2,100 feet per second. You still have plenty of energy even at 400 yards. This is a great deer option with this bullet. Again, probably up to 350. And it's pretty flat shooting as well. Number 2 is the 270 Winchester. This is not the first time I've mentioned the 270 Winchester in a top cartridge for deer choice. In fact, for the general public, I think it's probably the best deer cartridge. But again, this video is about my picks. So at number 2, 270 Winchester, it just works. It has good trajectory, flat shooting. It gives you great velocities, decent BC in the bullet range. Let me show you some of the performance with the 270 Winchester. You guys all know about the 270. Okay, 130 grain. Again, over 3,100, maybe 3,150. Really good performance. I think the 130 grain is its sweet spot, especially for deer. Now, I think the 270 is versatile enough to hunt bigger game, but I would use a bigger bullet, a 140 grain over 3,000, 150 grain at 2,900, and of recently, I've done some load development with the 165 AccuBond long range in my 270. I'm getting anywhere from 2750 to 2800 depending on the powder I'm using. I'm going to have that as an elk load for my son. But the 270 is a very good deer cartridge. It's very flat for longer distance. It's hard to beat the 270. Since I talked about 2 bullets for the 7mm 08, I will give 2 bullets for the 270 Winchester. The first one is what I have loaded in my 270. This is a 130 grain partition. Partition's old, low BC, but it still works. And especially for the ranges that you usually will typically hunt deer, it is very good. The other bullet is going to be another LRX. I think the 270 has an amazing bullet in the LRX. It's a 129 grain. It has a pretty darn good high BC. And then when you're pushing a 130 grain class bullet at around 31 to 3150, wow, you've got quite the combination in the 270 Winchester. Here are the ballistics real quick for the 270 and a 129 grain LRX. With a muzzle velocity of 3,100 feet per second, your energy is mid 2,700 foot-pounds. You're going to feel this a little bit more than a 7mm 08. It's going a bit faster, shooting about the same weight bullets. Now, this has an advantage over the 7mm 08 because at 400 yards, I still think you have enough velocity to get this LRX to expand properly. And you get about 100 more foot-pounds at 400. And 4 inches of less drop. Coming in at number 1, I don't think any of you are going to be surprised by this, the 257 Weatherby Magnum. Now this cartridge is not a 257 Weatherby, this is the 25-06 Remington. And a lot of people can make a very good argument that this really should be the number 1 deer slayer. You know, everything the 270 Winchester does, this does a little bit quicker with a little bit lighter bullets. So it's a really good cartridge. But me being a Weatherby fan, I gotta go a little crazier than this. As for bullets for the 257 Weatherby, I kind of want to talk about 3. I currently only have 2 of them. Number 1 we're talking about is the Hammer Hunter. This is a 92 grain. It is a monolithic bullet, and out of my rifle I get sub half MOA accuracy, and it's nearly going 3,900 feet per second. As you can imagine, that's very flat shooting. The other bullet that I really like is a 101 grain Barnes LRX. And again, I can get crazy velocities, and I know people can get well over 3,600 feet per second. I've personally have gotten up to 3,800 feet per second with this bullet, but yeah, it's pretty crazy. Then the last bullet I would love to try if I could ever get my hands on it is a 110 grain Nosler AccuBond. Let's look at the ballistics with the 257 Weatherby with a 101 grain Barnes LRX going 3,650 feet per second. Now I've gotten 3,800 with good accuracy, but you know, most people are not going to get that. So the energy is nearly 3,000 foot-pounds. Recoil, very similar to a 270 Winchester. Now out to 400 yards, this has plenty of velocity to open up, almost, well, mid 2650 basically. And the energy is getting close to 1,600 foot-pounds. Also check out the drop, 16 inches at 400. The flat 270 has 23 inches of drop. These are my top 3 picks. Again, you can't go wrong with basically any cartridge for deer hunting. So in the comments, let me know what your top 3 would be. Maybe you share some of the same ideas I do. Thanks again so much for watching. Have a great day.